In the summer of 1780, British generals inside occupied New York believed they were preparing a surprise attack against the newly arrived French army at Newport. They had ships, troops, and the initiative. Then the plan stalled. Sir Henry Clinton kept his soldiers close to New York because Washington appeared to be preparing an assault on the city. But that American threat was largely an illusion. Washington knew what Clinton intended because British secrets had already escaped New York through a chain of shopkeepers, farmers, couriers, coded letters, and whaleboats. The city Britain controlled had become Washington's listening post. Its officers talked in stores. Its ships revealed their movements at the docks. Its orders traveled through streets filled with civilians no patrol could fully screen. One captured courier could have sent them all to the gallows. Yet the chain survived for years. Britain occupied New York. Washington weaponized the occupation, and the empire never saw the trap closing from inside its own headquarters. New York, September 1776. The city had become the center of British power in America. Warships crowded the harbor. Red-coated patrols controlled the streets. Loyalist informers watched boarding houses, taverns, and ferry landings. British officers moved through the city with the confidence of men who believed the rebellion was collapsing around them. George Washington needed to know what they planned next. So he sent one man. Nathan Hale was 21 years old, a schoolteacher turned Continental officer. He had volunteered for a mission almost no trained intelligence officer would accept today. He would cross into enemy-held territory, pose as a civilian, gather information, and somehow return through a city filled with soldiers looking for exactly that kind of intruder. There was no extraction team, no secure relay, no compartmentalized network waiting behind him. If Hale was discovered, there was nothing between him and the gallows. He entered British-controlled Long Island, carrying the courage of a soldier and the cover story of a Dutch schoolmaster. For several days, he moved through villages and military positions, observing roads, camps, and troop movements. He reportedly concealed notes in his shoes or clothing. Then the operation collapsed. On September 21, Hale was captured near the British lines. Accounts differ on exactly who betrayed or identified him, but the result was immediate. British officers found enough evidence to treat him as a spy. The next morning, the 22nd of September 1776, Hale was taken to the gallows in Manhattan and hanged without a formal trial. The sentence was not unusual. In 18th century warfare, a soldier captured out of uniform behind enemy lines could expect little mercy. The line later attributed to Hale, that he regretted having only one life to lose for his country, made him a martyr. But martyrs do not send reports home. Hale's courage survived. His intelligence did not. That was the real failure. Washington had asked one man to collect the information, protect it, carry it across enemy territory, and return safely. Every step depended on the same person. Once Hale was captured, the entire operation vanished with him. The British saw the hanging as proof that their security system worked. They controlled the streets, the ferries, the docks, and the roads out of the city. A lone American spy had entered their territory, and they had destroyed him before he could escape. They thought the danger had been removed. But Washington was learning something more important. The problem was not that Hale had lacked bravery. The problem was that bravery had been asked to do the work of a system. A single spy could be followed. A single courier could be searched. A single hidden notebook could become a death sentence. Washington still needed information from New York, but he could not afford another mission built around one heroic volunteer. The British occupation was becoming too large, too organized, and too dangerous for improvisation. He needed collectors who looked like civilians because they were civilians. He needed one person to hear the secret, another to carry it, another to hide it, and another to move it beyond British reach. Most of all, he needed a network in which no single arrest could reveal the whole design. Nathan Hale had entered New York alone. The next spies would enter it as shopkeepers, farmers, riders, and boatmen, already living inside the city's daily life. Washington would not send Britain another hero. He would build a machine. Washington did not solve the problem immediately. For 2 years after Nathan Hale's death, American intelligence around New York remained uneven, dangerous, and often improvised. Reports arrived through merchants, deserters, prisoners, and officers willing to cross the lines. Some were useful, others were rumor. Washington could receive 3 descriptions of the same British movement and still not know which one was real. By the autumn of 1778, that was no longer acceptable. New York was not merely another occupied city. It was the main British headquarters in North America, protected by warships, fortified positions, checkpoints, and thousands of soldiers. Orders passed through it. Reinforcements landed there. Naval movements began there. If Washington could see inside New York, he could see the British war before it reached the battlefield. In November, he turned to Major Benjamin Tallmadge. Tallmadge was 24 years old, a cavalry officer from Setauket on Long Island, and a former classmate of Nathan Hale at Yale. He understood the cost of sending one man into enemy territory. He also understood the geography around New York better than most officers in the Continental Army. Long Island stretched east from the occupied city like a narrow corridor. British troops held the western end. Loyalist communities, patrols, farms, coves, and small roads filled the rest. North of the island lay Long Island Sound. Beyond that water was Connecticut and territory where American riders could move more safely. Tallmadge saw more than distance. He saw a chain. The new system would not depend on one man entering New York, gathering intelligence, and carrying it all the way back to Washington. Each person would handle one section. One would collect, another would transport, another would hide the message, another would carry it across the water. If one link was captured, the whole network might still survive. Tallmadge began with someone he already trusted, Abraham Woodhull, a farmer from Setauket and the son of a local judge. Woodhull knew the roads, families, shorelines, and political tensions of Long Island. He could travel without immediately looking like a continental officer disguised in civilian clothing. But trust did not remove the danger. Repeated journeys toward British-held New York could attract attention from patrols, loyalist neighbors, or officers who began remembering his face. If the British searched the wrong saddlebag or followed him back towards Setauket, the network could die before it had properly begun. So Tallmadge stripped away identities. Woodhull became Samuel Culper. Tallmadge became John Bolton. Washington's own name would eventually disappear behind a number. These were not theatrical disguises. They were firebreaks. A letter captured on the road could expose an alias without immediately revealing the person behind it. An agent could know the name of his contact without knowing the full identity of the man receiving the final report. The network was being designed to survive partial failure. That was the reversal Washington needed. The British security system was built to catch a spy, one suspicious stranger carrying one dangerous document. Tallmadge was building something harder to see, a civilian chain whose members already belonged to the landscape, whose movements could resemble trade, family business, or ordinary travel. Still, one problem remained. Woodhull could gather rumors from Long Island and occasionally enter New York, but repeated journeys into the occupied city were too dangerous. Washington needed someone who did not have to penetrate British society because he was already inside it. Someone who could stand near British officers without looking out of place. Someone whose daily work gave him a reason to hear what ships were arriving, what regiments were moving, and what people inside headquarters believed would happen next. In the summer of 1779, the network found him. His name was Robert Townsend, and his most effective disguise was his real life. Robert Townsend did not look like the man who should have been carrying George Washington's war inside his head. He was a quiet merchant in his mid-20s, working in British-occupied Manhattan. His family had loyalist connections. His business brought him into contact with customers, travelers, printers, and officers who had no reason to lower their voices around him. That was precisely why he was valuable. Townsend did not need to sneak past the British lines. He woke up inside them. From his shop and the social world around it, he could observe which regiments were arriving, which ships were preparing to sail, what supplies were being purchased, and what rumors were circulating among men close to British headquarters. A single conversation meant little. 5 conversations, a shipping notice, and an unusual order for provisions could reveal a movement before the troops themselves understood it. Under the name Samuel Culper Jr., Townsend wrote what he learned. But collecting the secret was only the first step. The The report still had to travel more than 50 miles east across Long Island, through territory watched by British patrols and populated by loyalists who knew their neighbors. Townsend could not carry it himself without abandoning the very cover that made him useful. So Austin Rowe entered the shop as a customer. Rowe was a tavern keeper from Setauket. His journeys to Manhattan could be explained as business. He purchased goods, loaded packages, and began the long ride east with the appearance of a man supplying a household or tavern. Somewhere inside the ordinary cargo was Washington's intelligence. Picture the route. Behind Rowe lay Manhattan, crowded with soldiers, ships, and British headquarters. Ahead stretched narrow roads through Queens and across Long Island. More than 50 miles of woods, farms, villages, and checkpoints. At any stop, a patrol could open a saddlebag, unwrap a package, or ask why the same man kept making the same journey. If Rowe was searched at the wrong moment, Townsend's words could become a map leading back to every person in the chain. He rode anyway. When Rowe reached Setauket, the intelligence passed to Abraham Woodhull. Townsend did not ride onward. Rowe did not cross the Sound. Woodhull did not carry the report to Washington. That separation was the defense. The British saw individual civilians moving through familiar routines. They did not see a communication line stretching across an occupied island. Woodhull arranged for the next transfer near the northern shore. Later tradition describes Anna Strong using laundry hung in specific patterns to signal that the boatman had arrived and indicate where he waited. Whether every detail of that story happened exactly as later remembered, the operational problem was real. The next meeting had to be arranged without a written invitation and without drawing a patrol toward the landing place. Then Caleb Brewster took the message onto the water. Brewster was a sailor, a soldier, and a man comfortable handling the fast whaleboats used along Long Island Sound. Under darkness, his crew pushed away from the island, with oars dipping into black water. This was the most exposed section of the chain. There were no crowds to disappear into, no shop counter, farm road, or stack of merchandise to explain their presence. A whaleboat caught in open water could be chased, fired upon, or forced ashore. Wind could delay the crossing. A changing tide could push the crew away from the Connecticut coast. One late departure could make the boat visible at dawn. If Brewster failed to cross, the intelligence remained trapped on the same island where it had been stolen. The men rowed north. On the Connecticut side, the report entered American-controlled territory and moved toward Tallmadge, often through mounted couriers. Only then could it continue to Washington's headquarters. The entire route could consume days. By the time a message arrived, a regiment might already have marched, or a ship might already have sailed. Intelligence that moved too slowly became history. Yet the chain worked. Townsend listened without leaving Manhattan. Rowe disguised military information as commerce. Woodhull managed the hidden junction. Brewster turned a small boat into a bridge across British control. Tallmadge received fragments and converted them into reports Washington could use. No single man looked like the network, because no single man was the network. Britain guarded New York as a fortress. Tallmadge had found the unguarded road running through ordinary life. By late 1779, the Culper Ring had solved one problem and created another. It could move intelligence out of New York. Now it had to survive being searched. A courier carrying a normal letter could still be stopped. A name, a place, or a military unit written in plain English might be enough to expose the sender, the route, and every person connected to it. Tallmadge responded by removing meaning from the page. He created a codebook containing 763 numbered substitutions for common words, people, and locations. George Washington became 711. New York became 727. British officers, towns, military terms, and ordinary instructions could all disappear into columns of digits. To a reader without the key, the report looked less like a confession and more like meaningless bookkeeping. But numbers alone were not enough. A page full of code was still suspicious. So the network added another layer. Secret writing developed by James J., a New York physician and the brother of John J. Washington called the substance white ink. The writer used one chemical to place invisible words on the paper. The recipient applied a second liquid, known as the counterpart, and the hidden writing slowly appeared. Now, a British patrol could unfold the page and see nothing. That was the theory. In practice, invisible writing introduced its own dangers. The correct chemical had to reach the agent, the report had to dry properly, the recipient needed the counterpart, and the blank sheet containing the message had to remain distinguishable from every genuinely blank sheet around it. A letter from the 8th of November 1779 reveals how close secrecy could come to absurdity. Talmadge instructed Robert Townsend to place his invisible report inside a fresh quire of commercial paper. The package would look like ordinary merchandise, leaving a shop. A patrol could examine the bundle, count the sheets, and find no visible military document. But Talmadge added a warning. Townsend needed to mark the correct sheet in some harmless way. Without that mark, Talmadge might receive roughly 25 pages of apparently blank paper and have no idea which one held the intelligence. He could apply the revealing chemical to the wrong sheet, forward an empty page to Washington, or destroy the message while trying to find it. The safest report in New York could become useless because it looked too ordinary. That was the reversal. The same invisibility that protected the network could blind the men running it. Picture Talmadge at a table in Connecticut. Beside him sits a small bottle of reagent. In front of him lies a stack of clean paper carried more than 50 miles from Manhattan and then rowed across Long Island Sound. Somewhere in that stack may be the number of troops preparing to move, the name of a ship about to sail, or a warning that could change Washington's next decision. Or there may be nothing. If Talmadge chose the wrong page, days of risk would end in silence. He brushed the chemical across the paper and waited. Letters began to emerge where no letters had been. The message still did not name Washington. It did not name Talmadge. It used numbers, aliases, and carefully separated responsibilities. Even if the report were discovered, the British would have to identify the ink, reveal the writing, break the code, connect the aliases, and reconstruct the route. Every layer forced the enemy to solve another problem. The codebook did not make the network invulnerable. Neither did the white ink. A careless agent, a captured courier, or a single recognizable name could still lead to arrest and execution. But together, these protections changed the odds. British security depended on finding evidence. Talmadge's system made the evidence look like merchandise, arithmetic, or an empty page. The most dangerous document in occupied New York no longer had to hide beneath a floorboard. It could lie in plain sight and appear to contain nothing at all. By 1780, the Culper Ring was no longer merely surviving British occupation. It was beginning to exploit it. New York concentrated nearly everything Washington needed to know. British headquarters issued orders there. Regiments arrived and departed through its streets. Transports loaded at its wharves. Officers discussed campaigns in rooms crowded with merchants, printers, servants, sailors, and visitors. The city made British power efficient. It also made British intentions visible. Robert Townsend occupied the perfect position inside that contradiction. His business gave him a reason to meet strangers, handle goods, read newspapers, and move through commercial circles without appearing curious. His work around New York society placed him near people who spoke casually because they believed they were among friends. Washington understood the value of that cover. When Townsend considered abandoning his normal work to collect intelligence full-time, Washington advised him to keep the shop. A professional spy would have needed an explanation for every conversation. A merchant already had one. Townsend did not need a British officer to hand him a secret plan. Intelligence was usually built from smaller pieces, a regiment ordering extra provisions, a transport taking on water, a sudden shortage of wagons, an officer saying he would soon leave the city, a newspaper item that contradicted what soldiers were telling their friends. One detail could be rumor. Several details pointing in the same direction could reveal an operation. The collection point was not a hidden room. It was the occupied city itself. That made Townsend valuable. But it also made his task psychologically dangerous. He had to listen without appearing to listen. Ask enough questions to keep a conversation moving, but not enough to be remembered. He had to maintain relationships with people whose defeat he was secretly helping to engineer. If one officer noticed that the quiet merchant remembered too much, Townsend's cover could collapse in a single evening. In July 1780, the network produced the kind of report Washington had built it to deliver. The Culpers sent information describing British commanders, troop numbers, locations, and order of battle around New York. Those were not decorative details. They allowed Washington to estimate what the British could defend, what they could send elsewhere, and how quickly they might move. A list of names and units became a map of British choices. This was the hidden reversal at the center of the occupation. The British had brought their army, navy, supplies, and command structure into New York, so they could control the war from one place. But every concentration created patterns. More troops meant more bread. More ships meant more sailors at the docks. A planned expedition meant orders, horses, barrels, rumors, and absences. The larger the machine became, the more traces it left. British officers could conceal a final order inside headquarters. They could not conceal all the preparations required to carry it out. Townsend collected those preparations. Rowe carried them east. Woodhull and Brewster moved them beyond the island. Talmadge compared them with other reports and placed the result before Washington. That last step mattered. A spy ring was not useful because it produced secrets. It was useful because a commander could convert those secrets into decisions. By the summer of 1780, another pattern was beginning to emerge inside New York. British forces appeared to be preparing for action connected to Rhode Island, where thousands of French troops were arriving to join the American war. The French landing created an opportunity Washington had waited years to see. It also created a target. If the British struck before the French secured their position, the alliance could suffer a devastating blow before the two armies ever fought together. The warning had to leave New York before the British expedition did. For the first time, the Culper chain was not merely telling Washington what the enemy had done. It was giving him a chance to act before they did. By July 1780, the French alliance had finally taken physical form on American soil. Thousands of French soldiers under the Comte de Rochambeau had landed at Newport, Rhode Island. Their arrival should have strengthened Washington. Instead, for a few dangerous weeks, it created one of the most tempting targets in North America. The French were still unloading supplies, organizing defenses, and recovering from the Atlantic crossing. If the British struck quickly, they might damage the alliance before the American and French armies could operate together. Inside New York, preparations began leaving traces. Orders moved through headquarters. Ships made ready. Troops were discussed in connection with Rhode Island. Culper reports suggested that Sir Henry Clinton was considering an attack against the French position. Now the network entered its most dangerous race. Townsend's information had to leave Manhattan. Rowe had to carry it across Long Island. Woodhull had to make the transfer. Brewster had to cross the Sound. Talmadge had to read, compare, and forward the report. Every mile consumed time. If the warning arrived after the British sailed, the intelligence system would become a record of a disaster it had failed to prevent. The message reached Washington. He could not simply march to Newport. His army was too far away, and a direct movement might confirm British suspicions while exposing other positions. He needed to stop Clinton without fighting him. So Washington turned the intelligence back toward the city that had produced it. Now picture the war from Sir Henry Clinton's headquarters in New York. Clinton faced two possibilities. One was an opportunity. Strike the French before they were fully secure. The other was a catastrophe. Weaken New York, then discover that Washington had been preparing to attack the British headquarters all along. New York was not just another garrison. It was the command center of the British war in America, a major harbor filled with transports, stores, artillery, and administrative machinery. Exposing it to a serious assault would be politically and militarily disastrous. Washington understood that fear. He began creating the appearance of preparations against New York. American movements, reports, and visible activity were shaped to suggest that the city, not Newport, was the real objective. The deception did not need to prove an attack was certain. It only needed to make Clinton uncertain enough to hesitate. A reckless commander might have ignored the threat and gambled everything on Newport. Clinton was not reckless. If he sent away too many troops and Washington attacked, he would be blamed for exposing the most important British base in the colonies. His caution was rational. That was precisely why Washington could weaponize it. Clinton kept forces close to New York. The window for a rapid strike against the French narrowed. Time passed. Rochambeau's troops strengthened their position. The plan that had looked dangerous in British headquarters began losing its advantage before the first decisive blow was delivered. This was the climax of the Culper system. The spies had not destroyed a regiment. They had not sunk a ship or captured a fortress. They had done something less visible and, in that moment, more valuable. They had altered the enemy commander's choices. Townsend had watched British preparations from inside the occupied city. The message had crossed roads, farms, hidden junctions, and open water. Talmadge had converted fragments into usable intelligence. Washington had taken that intelligence and manufactured the one threat Clinton could not safely dismiss. Clinton saw an American attack taking shape around New York. He did not see that the threat had been built from secrets stolen inside his own headquarters. The British commander was not fooled because he was stupid. He was fooled because the evidence matched the danger he was already responsible for preventing. That was the decision trap. The more important New York became to Britain, the more frightened Clinton had to be of losing it. The more frightened he became, the easier it was for Washington to influence him with signs of an attack that did not need to happen. Britain had concentrated its power in the city. The Culper Ring concentrated Washington's attention on the cracks inside that power. No battle marked the exact moment. The British opportunity disappeared. There was no field covered in bodies, no captured cannon, no surrender ceremony. There was only a decision made in a headquarters, ships that did not sail as planned, troops that remained close to New York, and a French army at Newport that was given more time to survive, organize, and become part of the alliance Britain had hoped to break. The city was finally reporting to Washington, and this time, he answered. The Culper Ring did not end with a dramatic arrest, a public trial, or a line of spies led to the gallows. That was the point. Its members continued passing information until the final years of the war. They remained separated by aliases, distance, and limited knowledge of one another. Townsend kept his merchant's face. Woodhull returned to the rhythms of Setauket. Rowe continued making journeys that looked like business. Brewster kept moving across the Sound. Most of them never received the fame Nathan Hale did. They received something more useful. They survived. On the 25th of November, 1783, the last British troops evacuated New York. For 7 years, the city had served as the center of British military power in America. Its harbor had held warships. Its streets had carried regiments. Its headquarters had issued orders meant to crush the rebellion. Yet for much of that occupation, information had been flowing in the opposite direction. British officers had believed walls, patrols, checkpoints, and executions could secure the city. Those defenses could stop an army. They could catch a careless courier. They could hang a lone volunteer. They could not prevent a merchant from remembering a conversation. They could not stop a tavern keeper from carrying an ordinary package. They could not guard every cove where a whaleboat touched the shore after dark. And they could not see words written on a page that appeared blank. The Culper Ring did not defeat Britain by itself. It did not win a battlefield or force a surrender. Its achievement was quieter. It gave Washington warning. It reduced uncertainty. It helped him understand what the enemy could do, then shape what the enemy believed he might do next. That is the difference between collecting secrets and using intelligence. One reveals the enemy's plan. The other changes it. The surviving codebooks, numbered names, faded letters, and empty-looking pages now sit far from the streets, where they once carried a death sentence. They are the remains of a system built from people Britain considered ordinary. The Empire controlled New York on every official map. But maps did not show the shop counters, hidden drops, saddlebags, oars, or silent pages connecting the city to Washington's desk. Britain held New York for 7 years. But for much of that time, the city was quietly working for George Washington. Subscribe for more hidden systems, battlefield deceptions, and forgotten decisions that changed the course of war.